Hello, everyone. We're going to get started here. We want to welcome everyone to the first installment of our new series, The Story of Our Lives. Thank you so much for joining us. My name is Sierra Green, and I work as an archivist here at the Heinz History Center. We're so honored to welcome our speakers, Njaimeh Njie and Dr. Robyn Fivush. A couple of housekeeping remarks to begin, some of which will be relevant to all, others of which will be more relevant to those that are either here with us in person or joining us virtually. We have live captions provided by ACS Captions. Virtual attendees, you can access this by clicking on the closed caption box at the bottom of your screen. This will be available to you throughout the evening. After a brief introduction, we'll be transitioning to two presentations by our speakers. Following this, Njaimeh and Robyn will briefly respond to one another's work. Then we'll have a Q&A session to round out the evening. We've had one slight change with Robyn joining us virtually this evening. We welcome questions for both Njaimeh and Robyn. For our virtual folks, please submit your questions throughout the event by using the Q&A button at the bottom of your screen. In-person attendees, you have two ways to submit questions. You can either scan the QR code that's on the sheet of paper at your seat and submit your questions digitally, or you can write them out the old-fashioned way and put them in our box that's on the reference desk to your left. So you have those two choices. We have extra pens and scratch paper for you at our reference desk. This really enables us to equally balance questions coming in from our in-person audience as well as our virtual audiences. Virtual attendees, if you need any technical support throughout the evening, please do reach out to us by using the chat box at the bottom of your screen, and we will do what we can to assist you. When contributing to the chat and the Q&A, we ask that you please help us maintain a supportive and positive environment. One note as well for our virtual attendees, to adjust the size of the live video feed and our speakers' PowerPoint presentations, you're going to see a slim bar or line that runs from the top of your screen to the bottom of your screen. You can click and drag this and adjust the sizes of both boxes to your preference. In-person attendees, there are restrooms available to you as you exit the space and make a left on the walkway here. We also have emergency exits to your left, as well as to your right behind the brick wall. Folks that are joining us virtually, I fully expect that y'all know where the restrooms and exits are in your homes, so we don't need to go over that. We do have assistive listening devices available for our in-person attendees, and those are available at our registration table in the foyer. One of the best parts about working at the Library and Archives is talking with the many researchers who come to view our collections here at the History Center. We work with hundreds of genealogists and community historians each year. They come to us looking for facts and details, of course, but once they're here, they often just want to chat. The things they tell us are often really profound and deeply personal. They share their ambitions and their concerns. They tell us about the family mysteries they hope to solve. They often wonder what they should do with all the information that they've uncovered. Does any of that matter? Will anyone in the future care? Our usual genealogical programming focuses on providing tips and techniques to improve research and help people find information. For this series, we wanted to address bigger, deeper questions. We decided to start at the beginning. Why tell family stories? What value does it bring to our lives? And Njaimeh and Robyn both deal with this question every day in very, very different ways. We hope that this pairing and some of the programs we're planning for the future will inspire new ways of thinking about the path and about this path and encourage dialogues between our speakers and you in our audience. So welcome and thank you again for joining us. With that, I'd like to introduce our first speaker, Njaimeh Njie. Njaimeh is a photographer, filmmaker, and multimedia producer. Her practice centers on everyday people, narratives, and landscape, with a particular focus on Black life and how the past shapes the present. Njaimeh is the founder, lead producer, of the nonfiction storytelling company 11 Stanley Productions, and she earned her BA in Film and Media Studies from Washington University in St. Louis in 2010. Welcome, Njaimeh.
Hey everyone, can you hear me with my mask on? Yeah. Thank you, Sister Frankie. I'm gonna pop this up a little bit. Is that a little better? Yeah. All right, cool, thank you. In Zoom land, virtual land, I hope you all can hear me as well. Thank you so much, Sierra, Eric, everyone here at the History Center for having me. It's really a privilege to be here, and I'm excited to chat with you all tonight. So my name is Njaimeh. I'm a photographer, filmmaker, multimedia artist. I work across platforms, which I'll talk a little bit about. But I was really intrigued by the prompt and by the overall topic of conversation this evening because it is so much about what I do. My family is really synonymous with storytelling. Some of the best storytellers I know are my mom and my aunts. It's always a good time. And I think as a kid growing up, I didn't realize how I was being trained for what I do now, but that's exactly what was happening. I remember very distinctly being maybe 9 or 10 years old. Mom, I've actually heard you kind of tell this story. I had witnessed this kind of a funny family event. And for the people who weren't there, some members of my family asked me to retell it. And I can remember distinctly going from like the listener to the storyteller. So kind of in real time, learning how, you can add a pause for effect or embellish a little bit or build suspense. And that's kind of how you learn to tell a story. And it's not just about what you say, but how you say it. And so this is an image from a project that I'll talk a little bit about. This is my childhood home, my childhood bedroom, actually, where I heard many stories and learned to tell stories. So I thought it would be fitting to start with that slide. I really want to talk just a little bit about how I've come to the archives and how my work is at the intersection of archival research and also storytelling about and with family. Maybe the clicker will work. It's almost guaranteed that I'm going to have a tech issue with every presentation I do. I can just. Okay, thank you so much. Okay, so I recently finished reading Miss Cicely Tyson's memoir, May She Rest in Peace. And when I hit this line, I said, okay, like this has to be worked into this presentation. It really blew me away how spot on it felt. She writes, "It is so meaningful when we manage, through documentation, to unearth the tiniest breadcrumbs of our past. Knowing your generational story firms the ground upon which you stand. It makes your life, your struggles, and triumphs bigger than your lone existence. It connects you to a grand plot line." Honestly, I could kind of stop right there. She kind of said it all, but it really grounds and serves a foundation for the work that I do. Being from Pittsburgh, we're from these enclaves, we're from these neighborhoods, and oftentimes our personal story, our family story really is an indication of the neighborhood story, the community story, the regional story. And so I think that and this quote really represents how we're all a piece of the whole, and it's important to put those pieces together to understand who we are and how we've gotten here. I'm going to talk about 3 projects. I'm going to run through them kind of quickly, but 3 projects that kind of, I think, are representational of the work that I do. The first was a public art project called Homecoming Hill District, USA. I got the immense privilege and opportunity to engage in a community-centered public art project beginning in 2016, lasting through 2019. As a part of that project, the goal was to figure out what the community wanted to say about itself and represent that in the public realm. one of the first places that I came was the archives. I had never done archival research before. I'd maybe like been in an archive, but had never gone further than that. But the folks here at the History Center were incredibly welcoming, incredibly accommodating. And this was the place that I turned to really start to peel back the layers of the story. When I started talking to folks in the Hill District, residents, past residents, what I kept hearing was, we want to see our stories told. We want to hear our stories told. And as a documentarian, I felt like, yes, that was in my purview, but the question was, how am I going to do that? Because the Hill District is this storied, esteemed place, you know, what could this project add to the pot? And so for me, coming to the archives was a really humbling experience because I'm like literally touching the history, you know, I'm piecing together things that people wanted to preserve of their own lives. These are just some examples of pictures that I took, like literally sitting on a table right over there while I was going through some of the archives. But I wanted to note one particular collection because I think it really represents that project and kind of why I think it's so important to go back and get the past. The Dorsey Turfley family papers here at the History Center, they tell the story of this really beautiful family, this Black family that lived in Pittsburgh for generations. This is not the order that I encountered the pictures, but I'm kind of putting it together in this way to illuminate the point. So this was their family home. It was torn down probably 30 years ago, but someone had the presence of mind to make a picture of it before it came down. Bless you. This is Mr. James Dorsey and his wife, Mrs. Zerby Ella Turfley Dorsey. I love that name. It takes a second to get out. Mr. Dorsey was the first Black physical education teacher in the city of Pittsburgh. And Mrs. Zerby was a Pitt grad, graduated in the class of 1917. So let's think about that for a second. They lived in this house on Center Avenue in the Hill District. And I love this picture, you know, it's very beautiful, they're very stately. But it made me think, how many houses do we pass like this that look like they're in a state of disrepair, but we can imagine, in this case, we have the evidence of who actually lived there. And so talking about peeling back those layers, within their archive, you can see, you know, their family growing from the time, actually this picture of the two of them, the written caption says that this was made on the day that they met, which I think is just incredibly sweet. You can see their young family, you can see their family as they're growing. So this is kind of a reverse chronology here. And then flash back even further, and you can see Mrs. Zerby as a young girl. So her father, Dr. Turfley, was the first Black doctor in Allegheny County. And it all starts with that house, right? So we're walking through the history all the time. It's right here under our feet. It's so tangible, but it feels out of reach. And so what I wanted to do, and what I want to do really overall in my practice is, again, go back and get that history and think about how we can bring it forward. Because if these folks could make it through their time, given all of the circumstances, and build something rich and beautiful and complex, but beautiful nonetheless, of their lives, then I think we can do the same. So as a part of the project, I conducted oral histories, approximately 50, to ask folks in the Hill District about their own experiences in the community. This is just to give you a slight idea of the scale of the information in the oral histories. Quite a bit of material. Asked if people would be open to donating their own images that kind of illuminated and added a little bit of color to the stories that they were telling about their lives in the neighborhood. I made new images as I was kind of going about. And then it came time to figure out how that was going to be presented in the public realm. This image was taken a few years ago on the side of August Wilson's childhood home. It now looks very different because it's under construction and almost completed as a brand new cultural center. But when I encountered it in 2017, this is what it looked like. The first thing that I noticed was the outline of the structure that had been torn down next to it. And what immediately sprang to mind was this idea of home people kept describing the Hill District as home, but they also talked about their lives within their homes. And so I wondered if I could create installations that would be in conversation with that metaphor, with that motif of home. So I went into the images that had been donated, the images that I had made, and I started to see what people I could cut out and place in conversation with each other. And this is an in progress like installation shot, but this resulted in a 10 by 20 foot installation on the side of the house called the Vanguard. And when I think of a word like Vanguard, I think of the front line. So these are the folks that you might meet when you come to a home, be it a physical home, an individual house, or the neighborhood as home. There were 4 installations overall. That was the first one. This was the final one called The Village. This was on the stairs of the Kaufman Auditorium on Center Avenue. Very good people, kind of meant to be reminiscent of a stoop, another space in the home. And you just have these towering figures looking out on and looking out for the community. I had a bunch of information left that couldn't really be represented in the visual installations. And so I went through those oral histories again and started picking out themes that were in conversation with each other. And that resulted in a digital archive that I kind of organized both chronologically and thematically to tell a resident-centered history of the Hill. So you can go to the website today, it's hillhomecoming.com. You can see the pictures, you can read excerpts of the narratives. And again, it's really meant to center the people as they experienced the space. And then finally, I had a lot more information left over, a lot of archival information, a lot of ephemera. So I created a digital, or excuse me, an interactive map that you can poke around and get more of a spatial / thematic understanding of the history of the Hill as articulated by the folks that I spoke to for this installation. For this project, not installation. Next project. I got a commission to work with the historic Center Avenue YMCA. It's an incredibly important Black civic and social space in the history of Black Pittsburgh, but also Black America, because the colored Ys were where folks in Black communities could go as a safe space to convene, to eat, to gather, to build community. All the while, I knew the spatial dimensions of the space in the building that I was allotted, but I needed one picture. I needed a picture of a street in the Hill District, an archival image. So I turned to the folks here at the History Center, and I found an image on historic Pittsburgh, and I was praying that like the clearances would work out, and they did. So this was kind of the missing piece of the puzzle. This is the final installation. It's up right now at the remodeled Center Avenue YMCA, which is a place that serves as transitional housing right now. But I, again, collaged images of archival places that I had found with images of places that I had made to create this fictional cityscape representing the Hill District neighborhood. And above the cityscape, I put pictures that Mr. Teeny Harris made within the Y to kind of show life within the building in the context of the neighborhood that they lived in. Last but not least, thinking about family storytelling, thinking about how the archives that I visited have shaped how I think about my own family history. I got the opportunity to do a project. It ended up being a photo book and also an exhibition and installation. It's called This Is Where We Find Ourselves. The commission was to create a body of work that documented life during the summer of 2020. And so I didn't feel like I could talk about the present without going back to the past to think about what brought us to the present. And so in the installation, I kind of take viewers or visitors through the city with me, with my written text, kind of like narrating what I'd like you to see and observe. and notice in these places that I'm pointing out. And it largely follows a personal history, a family history, going back to my family's migration here from the South all the way through the present, kind of back and forth. It's a non-linear narrative. Stops in the Hill District, speaks about quote unquote urban renewal, gentrification, etc. So that installation is represented on the left, but on the right is the photo book, and that digs more into my family's archive. We're really blessed to have so many images. My grandfather was a photographer, my parents are photographers, among doing many other things, but I was able to, with their help, stitch together a story using pictures that my family members had taken, like a picture taken in the 40s by my grandfather in Timminsville, South Carolina, where his family migrated from, and merging those or connecting that to an image on the right in Homestead, Pennsylvania, where they migrated to. So just thinking about how to take what I've learned of archival research and apply that to how my own family documents our stories. They already had plenty of more than a head start. Now we're really just in conversation about how to keep that going. The project ends, it starts with the first picture that I showed, like my childhood bedroom. It ends in the evening on the porch of my parents' home. So kind of thinking about coming full circle. And really for me, it's an opportunity to get specific, to make those pictures, to take those stories that I've been telling on a regional level and bring them home. And I think that we all have that capacity to think about how our families, how our own stories fit into that larger narrative. And it's important work because that's how we tell people that we're here. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Njaimeh, for that remarkably insightful glimpse into your work and some of the reflections you have sharing with us about the importance of sharing family stories. We deeply appreciate it, and I'm really looking forward to your exchange with Robyn and the Q&A session. I'd like to next introduce our speaker, Dr. Robyn Fivush. Robyn is the Samuel Candler Dobbs Professor of Psychology and Director of the Institute for the Liberal Arts at Emory University, where she has been on faculty since 1984. She received her PhD from the Graduate Center of the City University of New York in 1983 and was a postdoctoral fellow at the University of California at San Diego from 1983 to 1984. She is a fellow of both the APA and APS. Her research focuses on the social construction of autobiographical memory and the relations among memory, narrative, identity, trauma, and coping. She has published over 150 books, book chapters, and articles, including her most recent book, Family Narratives and the Development of an Autobiographical Self. Welcome, Robyn.
Thank you. Good evening. Sierra, can you hear me?
Yes, we can clearly.
Okay,
yes,
great. Then I'm going to start sharing my screen.
Wonderful. Thank you.
So good evening, and thank you for inviting me to be part of this very exciting project on family storytelling. I want to really thank Sierra and Eric for including me and being such wonderful partners in making this program happen. I wish I could be there in person. As you can hear, I'm having a little trouble with my voice. I apologize. I will try and project as much as I can. And certainly that was an amazing beginning to the evening. And Njaimeh, thank you for that rich and textured presentation about the importance of family storytelling. I'm coming at family storytelling from a somewhat different perspective. I'm really looking at the ways that families are telling their current stories and how those stories will evolve into the intergenerational and family history stories that become so important for defining who we are in the world. And just as my background, I should tell you that I've been studying family stories for over 3 decades now. And one of the first questions that we began asking was, what kinds of stories do families tell? And this seems like a very simple question, but in fact, when you start looking at family stories, they're actually quite complex, as all of you in the audience know. You're all family historians and genealogists. You know the complexity of the stories that are layered in every family. So in thinking about the different types of family stories, I think about them as 4 different buckets, although I want to underscore that they're always interleaved in the actual telling. And I'll come back to that in a minute. There are personal stories, shared family stories, intergenerational narratives, and family history. Personal stories are the stories each one of us constructs about our own personal lives. It's the stories of our own personal experiences, the story we tell about ourselves, what's often called a narrative identity. Who am I? How did I become this person? And most important, perhaps, who do I want to be? What are my values and beliefs and my principles? These stories are always situated in larger stories, both neighborhood, community, cultural stories, but also, of course, importantly, family stories. Shared family stories are stories where each member of the family, whether it's parents and children, siblings, grandparents and grandchildren, where they all had the experience together and they're now reminiscing together about that. So everybody brings their own experience to the sharing of the story. Remember when we went to the beach last summer? Remember when we went to that really tacky drive-in to see Jaws? And every member of the family, or every member that's sharing in the telling, has their own piece of the story, their own lived experience. In contrast to this, intergenerational narratives are narratives that the older generation tells to the younger generation. These are narratives that were lived experience for the older generation, the grandparent or the parent who's telling their story to the younger generation. But the member of the younger generation, the child or grandchild that's listening to that story, didn't share that experience. So they're hearing it, they're listening to it, they're receiving that story. And they're, as we'll talk about in a few minutes, they're using that story to understand themselves in the world. And then there's, of course, family history. Family history is the generations of stories. This is certainly part of what Njaimeh was talking about, the photographs, the diaries, the letters. It is somebody's real experience, but it's not being told by a live person anymore. It's moved into the realm of history. As I said, when we tell these stories in our families, they're always interleaved. So let me give you an example of what I mean by that, and also an example of the kinds of data that I've been working with, my students, my colleagues, and I have been working with over the last 3 decades. We work with families. They invite us into their homes, and we frankly just hang out with them multiple days at a time, for hours at a time. We tape record them in everyday interaction. We sometimes follow the same family for a number of years and record their stories over time. And in most of these stories, in addition to the spontaneous family interactions, we also ask the families explicitly to tell us stories, different kinds of stories in different studies. So in this one excerpt that I'm going to share with you now, this is a story being told by a family. This was a family of study of families in the broader Atlanta area, broadly middle-class families, very diverse ethnic and racial backgrounds. And we were particularly interested in families with an adolescent child. So this is a family of 4. It's a mother, a father, Jasmine, which is a pseudonym, with a 14-year-old daughter. Jasmine also had a younger brother who's not part of this excerpt. During this conversation, we'd asked the family to talk about a time that was particularly challenging or stressful for the family. And the father chose to talk about the death of his grandfather. So this is Jasmine's great-grandfather. This is an excerpt from a much, much longer conversation. And the father is talking about hearing about his grandfather's death and needing to leave to travel to the funeral. He says, we had to go up at Christmas time for Grandpa's funeral, didn't we? And Jasmine assents, mm-hmm. The father agrees. And what do you remember about that? It was very sad. And the father agrees. It was sad. Jasmine says it was scary. Father doesn't pick up on that. They come back to that much later in the conversation. But the father elaborates on why it was sad. Especially it was right at Christmas time. Grandma had just passed away about a year before that, made it hard on everyone. I had to get out of work. Mom had to get out of work, etc. The mother chimes in, yes, I thought it was especially sad for Grandpa, for your dad, having to deal with that. The father says, yeah, it was sad because it was my last grandparent too. And again, they ask how it affected Jasmine. And she says, I thought it was sad, even though I didn't spend a whole lot of time with our great grandpa. Clearly, this part of the conversation focuses a lot on how sad the family was. A couple of things that I want to point out here. One, the family truly shares in expressing this emotion together. They validate and explain and elaborate on this emotional reaction. But they're also placing this within their own personal experience. The father had to get home from work. The mother had to leave work. Jasmine had to leave school. They're placing it in a larger family lineage of the father's grandparents, Jasmine's great grandparents. And the mother is placing herself inside this family as well, even though it's not her direct father and mother. So we see both personal stories, shared family stories, and family history all being expressed in this small little excerpt of a longer conversation. When do we tell these kinds of stories? Family stories are told all the time. They're told in small snippets, in bits and pieces, and they're told as long, elaborated stories that are told again and again at family rituals and ceremonies. They're told over meal times, over the dinner table. They're told in the car. They're told over bedtime, during walks in the park. In fact, and I'll be presenting some evidence around this in just a minute, family stories emerge approximately every 5 minutes in spontaneous family conversation and account for about 1/3 to 40% of all conversations. Now, some of this is just stories about what happened during your day, things that we share when we come around the dinner table. And some are these family history stories. So family stories happen all the time. Why do they matter? I think we all already know this intuitively from our own family stories. We know this in the ways that Njaimeh talked about the importance of family stories, but we were really interested in documenting the ways in which family stories matter for children, both early in development, when they're preschoolers and just learning to tell their stories, and in adolescence, when they become part of the larger cultural world and start making decisions about who they want to be in their own adult lives. So we've been looking at the consequences of family storytelling, if you will, the effects of family storytelling. Exactly how does this impact children's development? And I'm going to talk about two types of research that we've been working on. As I said, I'm going to start by talking about the preschool years, and then I'll talk about adolescence. Children start talking about their past experiences virtually as soon as they begin talking, 18, 20 months of age. Children are already putting one or two word utterances together to refer to things that happened in the past. It might be something very simple, like mentioning berries eaten at breakfast that morning. And it's parents who take on the role of structuring these narratives, of guiding these narratives, of helping the child tell these stories in more coherent ways. Let me give you an example of what I mean. This is 4-year-old Andrea, again, a pseudonym, and her mother. They're talking about an event that they've talked about several times before. This had happened a few months ago. Andrea had been pinched by a playmate at preschool and was very upset about it. And she keeps bringing it up and talking about it. So this is part of an ongoing conversation. And Andrea introduces us again. Her friend is mentioned and she says, she pinched me. And her mother says, what did you do when she did that? I started crying. And then what did you do? You went and told the teacher? Yes, I went to her. And then what happened? And Andrea says, I had to go to the hallway and the other teacher came. I had to go out in the hallway with her. She goes on in a fairly incoherent way. The mother brings her back after several seconds and says, but then after you got through that, what happened with you and your friend? Did you talk about it? No, she said sorry, but she had to get in trouble. She apologized, right? Did you accept her apology? Did you say okay? Yeah, you all still talk. You kind of made up. You're still friends. Andrea is not having any of that. No, not no more because you don't have school going on. Notice what the mother is doing here. She's asking open-ended questions, asking Andrea to respond, to provide more information. But she also guides her in the temporal patterns of telling the event. Well, then what happened? Then you told the teacher. And then again, like with Jasmine's family, she focuses on the emotions. But here the mother focuses on a canonical narrative of forgiveness. But she apologized and you're friends again. We need to resolve this. Andrea's not so sure, but her mother is modeling a way to resolve these emotions. We've now done studies with hundreds of families, mostly mothers, but also fathers, talking with their preschool children, both in the US and actually across many other countries as well. We see that mothers really differ in the extent to which they elaborate and express emotions in these conversations. Mothers who are more elaborative and emotionally expressive, like April's mother, have children who show a lot of positive outcome. They show a higher level theory of mind. This is the idea that we all understand that we have minds, that we have thoughts, we have emotions, we have beliefs. You also have thoughts and emotions and beliefs. Your thoughts may be quite different than mine. Your emotions may be quite different than mine. This understanding that different people can think different things, feel different things, is an achievement during the preschool years that is really facilitated by this more expressive, elaborated maternal reminiscing style. This sets the stage for children being more empathic and more sympathetic. Children of more elaborative and emotionally expressive mothers during reminiscing show high levels of emotion regulation. They're better able to control their temper tantrums. They're better able to cope with feelings of anger and of sadness. They have a higher sense of themselves, self-esteem. They feel good about themselves. And they show more secure attachment. So attachment is the emotional bond that makes you feel secure in the world, that makes you feel safe, that you're loved, and you can trust people. So by learning how to tell our own stories, even in these very early years, children are learning how to understand themselves and other people in more complex and emotionally complicated ways, and in ways that lead to better relationships. I want to move now to talking about why family stories continue to matter in adolescence and move more into the idea of when we move out of our personal stories and into family, shared stories and family history and why that matters. I want to talk about one particular study that my colleagues and I did. It's called the Family Dinner Time Study. And again, as I said, we recorded families in their homes. In this particular study, we recorded families simply eating dinner together. We just asked them to tape record dinner time conversations. Typical Tuesday night spaghetti dinner. All of the families we were working with had an adolescent child, about 14 years old. We were really interested in seeing the ways in which families tell stories. They're coming together at the end of the day. They've been to work, they've been to school, they've been with friends. How do they come together at the end of the day, share their day, and reestablish their shared identity as a family? So we looked at all the conversations that families had across the dinner time. So what do families talk about over dinner? Three broad categories of conversation emerged. There was a lot of talk about behavioral regulation. Pass the peas, please sit down, don't talk with your mouth full. This is the amount of talk by mothers in the blue line, by fathers in the purple, daughters in this burnt orange, and sons in this gray green. So you can see that this accounts for not quite a third of all the family conversation is just regulated behavior. Then there's just general knowledge. This is information about, did you see that they're building a new Walmart on Main Street? A lot of this is about the information that children are learning at school. Conversations about the American Revolution, about how electricity works. So it's just general knowledge. And we see, again, the amount of talk by mothers, by fathers, by daughters, by sons. And it's a little bit more than behavioral regulation. It's about a third of the conversation. We don't see any differences in how much mothers and fathers, daughters or sons talk. Different story when we talk about narratives. Importantly, the first thing to note is that narratives account for about 40% of the entire dinner time conversation. So again, stories come up all the time. And here we see that mothers are doing most of the talking. I want to point out, and I'll show you on the next slide. This doesn't mean mothers are telling the stories. This means mothers are soliciting the stories. They're asking for the stories. What kinds of stories are they asking for? So again, we can think about the kinds of family narratives that are told around the dinner table. There are what are called the today I narratives. These are essentially, what happened at school today? Who did you eat lunch with? What happened to your math test? It's also stories about the parents at work. What happened at work today? Did you see your friend Janet? And here we see the number of stories that are initiated where the first question is asked or provided by the mother, by the father, or by one of the children. We see the mothers are asking, soliciting most of the today I stories. So mothers are bringing the family together and weaving their days together into a family story. Then there are family stories. Family stories, again, are of multiple types. These include both the shared family stories. That reminds me of our, going to the beach last summer. And it's also these intergenerational narratives and family history narratives. These are woven into an everyday family dinner time conversation. Every family we recorded told some of these family stories over dinner. All of them told at least one or two intergenerational narratives around a typical family dinner time conversation. Importantly here, when we see the numbers of stories that are initiated, brought into the conversation by the mothers, by fathers, and by children, children are initiating these stories as often as the parents are. Children are initiating stories that they've been told before, stories about their parents' childhood, stories about their grandparents. That's like the time you told me about the vegetable garden when you were growing up. That's like when you were in band, right? Right, Dad? That's like when you were on the swim team, right, Mom? So children are interested in these stories. They're bringing them into the conversations. And I want to give you a sense of what these stories are like. I'm not going to give you an excerpt from one of the dinner time conversations. Frankly, they're too long and meandering. I'm going to give you a story that a 14-year-old adolescent boy told us. One of the participants in this study, in this dinner time study, we also asked him to tell us stories he knew about his parents growing up. I'm sorry. And this is a story that he told us. He's 14 years old. Tell me a story you know about your mom when she was about your age. Well, she was telling me that they were by the bus stop one day and this kid had been made fun of a lot. And she just didn't want, she was kind of tired of it. And so she just said, why don't you just stop making fun of this kid and stuff? And it ended up that the bully punched her in the nose. It was just so weird because, first of all, you don't usually hit a girl. I mean, I don't know, people just say that. But when you think about it, I don't know, but he didn't even know her. He just punched her in the nose. And she actually had to go to the hospital and stuff. And so it just seems like a pretty mean thing to do. for the bully, and just a really courageous thing to do for my mom, just to stand up for some kid and get her nose broken. There are so many things about this story. First, of course, it's just a wonderful story. It's short, but it's so coherent. But notice that he doesn't just talk about what happened. He's involved. He's inside his mother's head, what she was thinking, what she was feeling, what she said. And look what he's taking from it. He's processing it as he's telling us this story. What does this story mean? How courageous it is for his mother to stand up to some bully. So we became very interested in these intergenerational narratives, these stories that adolescents know about their parents when their parents were growing up. We speculated that these narratives provide a powerful framework from which adolescents understand their own experiences, that these stories provide a model to emulate when constructing a personal identity. I love the way, in Njaimeh, you said how the past speaks to the present, how these stories speak to the child as they are thinking about themselves, to explore alternative values within the family, to achieve both a sense of connection to the family, why they're like their mother, why they're like their father, but also individuation, how they're different. They're an individual, separate person. And of course, the transmission of cultural values. We saw that clearly in Dave's story about his mother, that it's courageous to stand up to a bully. So we've now done multiple studies. We've talked to hundreds of adolescents. We've asked them to tell us all kinds of stories about their families. We've asked them to just tell us stories you know about your parents when they were growing up, any story you happen to know. We asked them for specific kinds of stories. Tell me about a time when your mother was about your age and she did something she was really proud of. Or tell me about a time that your father did something he was ashamed of. So stories of transgression where the parent did something that they feel guilty of or shamed about. And what are they telling their children about that? What is their child taking away from that? Story about your mother when she was a child that illustrates who she is as a person. I think one of the most important things we learned is, as I said, multiple studies, hundreds of adolescents, well over 90% of all of the adolescents that we've now worked with in all of our studies can easily tell us these stories. So these stories are being told. More importantly, these stories are being heard, they're being internalized, and these children are telling us these stories, and they want to tell us these stories. But there are also individual differences in how they tell these stories. What we saw from Dave was a very articulate, elaborated, expressive story. Again, that elaboration of detail, the expression of emotion that we saw in the early maternal reminiscing studies. We see that mirrored in these adolescents. Just to give you another example of how prototypical these stories are. This is a 14-year-old adolescent girl, and she's talking about her mother. And she's saying a story that her mother told her. I think she was in 6th or 7th grade. Yeah, it was middle school, and she's going to class. And she saw these two twins that they'd always been picked on. And some boys and girls, I think, were just crowded around them and calling them names and everything. And actually, it was just one of the twins. And she was sitting there crying and couldn't do anything. And my mom felt so bad. She went up and she grabbed the girl and she said, "Come with me now." And she stormed off and she took her up to the office and said, "This girl needs some help. Will you please help her?" And then she ran to her class, but she was late. So my mom's teacher got really, really angry because she didn't have a pass or anything. So she gave her a detention, I think. And my mom just didn't have the courage just to fight back because it was a big, scary teacher. So she just didn't fight back. And so she told me that, I think, when I didn't have the courage to stand up to a teacher or to tell a teacher that I was struggling. She just told me that story and said, she said I should have written the teacher a letter because verbally speaking it is really, really difficult. So she said, I wish I had sat down later that night and written my teacher a letter and stuck it in her mailbox. And then maybe the teacher would have realized what I had been doing and that it was a good thing and that I was trying to help someone out. So, I mean, I've written teachers' letters now, and it helps me to actually understand, and for me to understand, and for the teacher to understand too. So what we're seeing in this narrative is very similar to what we saw in Dave's narrative. Again, standing up to a bully. But in this case, her mother is called to task for it and isn't able to recover very well. But the lesson that the daughter learns is to stand up for herself when these kinds of things happen. So we looked at all of these narratives across all of these studies. And again, sorry, I'm not advancing. Let's see, there we go. And again, these individual differences. Adolescents who tell these more elaborated and emotionally expressive intergenerational narratives, we're seeing highly positive outcome as a result of knowing these very elaborated stories. We're seeing higher levels of identity exploration. Adolescence is a time when adolescents are trying on all kinds of different ways of being in the world. Who should I be? What should I do in my community? Who should I be at school? Who should I be with my friends? Adolescents who know more elaborated and emotionally expressive stories about their parents are showing more and healthier exploration of their own sense of who they are. They're still showing higher levels of secure attachment. Again, showing more positive relationships, more open communication with their parents and with their friends, and higher sense of trust, both of their parents and in their friendships. They show higher self-esteem. They like themselves better. And they show fewer problem behaviors, internalizing and externalizing. Internalizing behaviors are things like anxiety, depression, withdrawal. They're showing less externalizing behaviors, things like anger, substance abuse. So it's very positive. It's very helpful for adolescents to know these stories. It's a huge source of resilience and positive outcome. So we became interested not only in how the particular stories that adolescents knew matter, but whether knowing the family history matters as well. So instead of focusing just on tell me a story you know about your parent, my colleague Marshall Duke and I devised what's called the Do You Know scale, or the 20 question scale. This is a simple index, simple yes, no. Do you know how your parents met? Yes or no. Do you know where your mother grew up? Your father? Do you know where your grandparents grew up? We're not asking them for the stories. We're just asking them whether they know this story or not. I want to point out that it doesn't matter whether they know this particular story. The idea here is the only way to know these stories is if you've been told stories about them. So you must be in a family that tells stories if you answer yes to a lot of these questions. And indeed, what we find is that adolescents who know more of their family history, who say, yes, I know these stories. I know something about my grandmother's schooling. I know something about my grandparents' wedding, show higher self-esteem, and again, fewer internalizing anxiety, depression, and fewer externalizing, acting out aggression, anger behaviors. So knowing these kinds of stories and having this kind of history matters. I want to again remind you that these are the stories that the adolescents are telling us, right? So these are not the stories that their parents are telling us they've told them. In fact, when we go back to the parents and we say, your daughter told me this story about when you stood up to a bully at a bus stop, the mother is always shocked. She's like, I can't believe he told you that. I can't believe he remembers that. When I told that story, he was just rolling his eyes. I didn't think he was paying attention at all. So I think the big lesson here is that adolescents are paying attention. They're hungry for these stories. They want these stories. And these stories matter for them. They're listening. They're taking on these stories. And when we ask the adolescents, why do you think your parents told you these stories? Why do you think she's telling you the story about standing up for a bully at the bus stop? We look at adolescents' responses to this question in terms of why they think their mother told them stories about her growing up, why their father told them stories about his growing up. And you can see, very similar, for the most part, Adolescents think that their parents are telling them these stories in order to teach them life lessons, this gray area, but also to learn more about who the parent is as a person. And adolescents want to know this. They're happy. They're pleased that they know more about their mother or their father. And they also talk about hearing these stories helps build a relationship between the parent and the adolescent. With mothers, very few of the stories, this little wedge here, are being told purely for entertainment value because they're funny. And fathers tell a few more stories just because they're funny, but the patterns are pretty much the same: to teach life lessons, to learn about the parent, to build a relationship. So what's the bottom line? What can parents and grandparents do? I think the first thing I want to reiterate is that family stories come in all sizes and shapes and flavors. They happen in small snippets as a simple throwaway line. Yes, I was in band also when I was in high school, just like you. I played the tuba. And maybe that's all that's said on this particular Thursday night. Maybe a little bit more of the story is added another evening or on another car ride. Maybe the stories are just told in little bits and pieces, or maybe they're told in special moments when the adolescent really needs to hear a particular kind of story. Maybe they're told as those wonderful family narratives that everybody wants to hear again and again and again about crazy Uncle Louie every Thanksgiving, told in exactly the same way, to much laughter. All of these stories matter. The stories come. They're part of our everyday conversation. We do want to be aware of the stories. We do want to be cognizant of making sure we tell our stories, but we can relax and know that our adolescents are listening. And these stories matter. It really matters for building adolescents' own sense of who they are. It gives them a sense of safety, of security, and of self-esteem. So thank you for listening to my story about stories. And I particularly want to thank my academic family, all of my colleagues, my students, all of the families who I've worked with over the years who have shared all of their stories with me. Thank you. And now I believe I'm going to stop sharing and invite Njaimeh to join me so that we can have a conversation.
So I think the two things that really jump out to me about what you shared were one, like the gendered nature of storytelling and how it breaks down differently between, men and women, mothers, fathers, grandmothers, etc., grandfathers. And when I think about that in my work, I actually kind of think about the gendered nature of the public versus the private sphere. So how I've noticed that oftentimes when I'm out like making pictures on the streets, I'm finding that I'm making pictures of men, and it's the women who are telling the stories. So I don't know, I just noticed that's how it tends to break down in my work. But the other thing that really jumped out to me was the piece about resilience, how hearing these stories and hearing how people in their family kind of overcame things or learned things really seeps into children. I thought that was really fascinating. It's something that I always thought, but it's nice to have the like hard evidence. This is something we kind of talked about when we first met virtually, but I'm kind of curious if you can tell us a little bit about how you got into this, because, well, I'm interested in your story, but it's just so fascinating that you're going into this level of depth and rigor with so many other families. I'm just curious about what drew you to this.
I get asked that question a lot, and I wish I had a really good story to tell you about how I got interested in this. But the answer is I kind of got pulled into it by the families. I was doing research looking at parent-child interaction and how children were remembering their past. And I was just started to tape record families talking. And the more I tape recorded families talking with each other, the more their stories jumped out at me and the importance of their stories. And I started to think about the role of stories more broadly, just the way you have, just, you know, you're a much more artistic expression of that, but the role of stories in creating a family and in creating that history. So then I just followed the families. But I also think what you said was so interesting about the role of neighborhood and space and place, and the way that that plays into how families create their own stories and how families create stories. I've been looking at families, but families are not isolated. Families interact with other families in neighborhoods and communities. And also families, as we know, are not always biological. They are families by all kinds of relationships, just because they've lived next door to each other for 20 years. So I think the work that you're doing really highlights the role that kind of community family building creates in creating our history.
Yeah, no, thank you. Yeah, I guess your work is just so validating because I think it takes something that a lot of times we do naturally, and it really makes it clear how much it matters. As you said, I don't know. I really have to mull over this because, again, it's like proof positive of pretty much everything I've done in my professional life. So I really appreciate being a part of this conversation. How did you find the families? Were these folks that you were like personally connected to, or was it
No,
more?
not at all. Not at all. We recruited with this is how long I've been doing this research, with paper flyers in churches and schools and community organizations. And then ultimately, of course, we went online to recruit. And it's just, so it is all families that are interested in, they know we're interested in family communication and family stories. So it is a select sample. But of course, due to the ethics of doing research, you have to obviously tell families what you're doing. And of course, families are also, they record for us, and then they're free to edit the tapes that they don't want to send us. So we probably get more of the positive side of family storytelling
Right.
than we might get in other contexts. But I think what you said is very important, that the stories of challenge and the stories of persistence and overcoming, I think, are particularly important. The funny stories, the positive stories are important. Sharing laughs, very important for emotional bonding. But for the adolescents, for the lessons they take, it's the stories of challenge, the stories of difficult times that are most meaningful.
Yeah. I'm thinking of conversations that we've had with my nephew who's 11, and like my mom said, you never know when he's listening because he will bring something up that you thought was so obscure or that you said so long ago, and it's very relevant to his present. I think I know the answer to this given the fact that this is research, but do you ever go back and visit with families, say like once the children have grown up, to kind of get more of a perspective of how those stories manifest later in life?
Probably not for as long as you would like us to. We have followed the same families for several years, 2 to 3 years, during the adolescent years, but we've not gone back to when those adolescents, and many of them would now be adults, obviously. But there are other researchers. One particular researcher, Elaine Reese, who's been following the same families from the time the children were 18 months old, and they're now in their early 20s, and some of them have children. And she's seeing the family patterns repeat So she is seeing that this early building of this resilience and positive child outcome does continue into early adulthood. But I also want to be clear that it's not the only pathway, nor is any child doomed. If you know, that you can start telling stories. If you're not a storytelling family now, start now. You can start building up that repertoire of family stories. It's never too late.
I love that. I love that. And again, when we spoke earlier, and I was saying, how my family tells a lot of stories, and you were saying that, your family hadn't so much. I love the idea of being able to start new traditions and kind of new ways of making your story. I guess that's kind of what I have. Robyn, did you have any other questions?
And I don't have, I want to spend more time on your websites and looking at your oral histories, but I love the quote you started with. Thank you for bringing that quote to all of us, that our family stories are a great plot line.
Well, thank you. Well, thank you to Mrs. Lee Tyson again. Rest in peace.
Always, yes.
Yeah. And thank you for the kind words.
Thank you so much, Robyn and Njaimeh. So at this point, we're going to transition to the Q&A from the audience. So just a reminder for those of you that are in person, you can use the QR code to submit your questions digitally or write it down and then submit it in our questions box. And those of us that are joining us virtually, please do submit your questions via Zoom. I'd actually like Njaimeh to pick up on the thread that you started off with in your conversation with Robyn as far as gender and storytelling. I was also really struck by Robyn's research and this idea of mothers and women as solicitors of storytelling, and it reminded me a lot of your work centering and celebrating Black women. So I'm wondering if you saw any connections there or reflections just between the two of you and your work together.
Thank you for that question. Yeah, I do see some parallels between our work in that capacity. And again, mostly I'm thinking about my own family. I grew up in a family with a lot of women, and I mean, what you're saying, Robyn, just feels so familiar. And yeah, when I think about the oral histories that I've collected, particularly in the Hill District, I don't know if it was just circumstance or maybe if I was like a little bit biased, but the majority of those oral histories were collected from women. But my very first project called Powered by Grace was specifically talking to Black women and girls in Pittsburgh about their experiences in the city and their kind of perceptions of themselves. So I do talk to women and femmes and also non-binary folks a lot.
Yeah, definitely. Thank you so much. Another topic that came up in some of our early conversations that I thought was really powerful and connects with this idea of family history and genealogy, and Njaimeh, is like through these conversations and through your work that is so individual and community based, that it's a priority for you to try to inspire a sense of the importance of preserving your family story and family histories, and doing so on that individual level. So I was wondering if you could kind of talk about that a little bit and what that has looked like in your work. That's something that's really of interest to us as archivists, is empowering folks just recognize the importance of their individual stories and in caring for them.
I would say for me, so again, my family is really blessed to have to be well documented, to have taken a lot of photos through the years. My mom saved our school papers and projects and artwork, et cetera. But I think where that drive comes from for me is when, I was raised in Pittsburgh in this very nurturing Black community. And there are people who are giants in that community. who are beloved and admired and spoken of so highly, that when you go outside of the community, or when people, from the outside looking in talk about Pittsburgh, those names aren't necessarily called. And so part of what I like to do, or I'm trying to do, is to say that, okay, they still matter. Like, we still have to hold up what they've done and how they've impacted people's lives. And I think we all have that agency to kind of, I just want us all to know, like, our stories are important. Like, the ways that we move through our communities, the people we interact with, that is all important, because, you have these broad stroke narratives of a place or a time, but something has to inform that narrative. It has to come from a place. And it's those family pictures, it's those diaries, it's the things that are held in these archives. That's the specificity that I think informs the future of what today is and what the past has been. So yeah, I guess I just want us all to understand, like, we have that power to preserve. It doesn't have to come from outside. No one has to knight you and say, like, you're an important person and that's the only way you get to keep your papers or, like, have an archive. It can be, I mean, I wouldn't necessarily recommend this from a material science point of view, but it can be in a big tub in the closet, right? Like one of those big plastic bins. It can start there. It doesn't have to be some grand thing. It's important because you made it and it's your family.
Thank you so much. And folks were really moved by your work. And someone was asking particularly about your installations that are exterior based in the community. Are those still available for viewing?
Thank you for the question. One of those installations is still up. It's interesting because of the 4 locations, 3 have changed hands or have gone under transformation in the time since I started working on the project. So I guess it shows how communities change and why it is so important to preserve those histories, because, something can be here for a long time, then be gone. Something can be here for a little bit of time, then be gone. But, it's important to kind of capture, I think, what things are while we can, especially now in a city like Pittsburgh where things are constantly changing.
Awesome. Thanks so much, Njaimeh. I'm going to switch gears and pose some questions to Robyn. So someone asked, how do you suggest we convince reluctant parents and grandparents to tell their stories?
It's an interesting question. I think that if you find the right moments, if you rather than making it a big deal, so to speak, and kind of, we're going to sit down and we're going to record your story. I mean, I think that really works for a lot of families, but I think in some families, like my grandmother did not like to tell stories. She would just dismiss it. It's not important. It's in the past. Forget about it. And the only way I could get her to tell me stories was kind of in the process of doing something together. So if we were cooking a meal or doing some baking, and I would kind of cajole her, introduce her. It's like, how did you learn to bake these kinds of cookies? And then maybe she would tell me about her mother. So I think that if you allow the stories to emerge in naturally occurring interactions, rather than necessarily putting a focus on it, that people can relax into telling their stories a little bit more.
Great, thank you. And then someone else was asking about family stories that really deal with difficult things that happen within the family. Wanting some guidance. How do we handle these stories? How should they be told, if at all? Should they leave the family or remain within it?
So the first thing I want to say, and it goes back to one of the questions that Njaimeh asked me about how we recruited families. We did not work with families that had extremely dark or difficult histories and things like alcoholism or abuse in the family story. So I want to first of all say that those kinds of family histories that are extremely difficult and often kept secret can be both very damaging, but that they need a different kind of conversation about them than just than challenging events, than more typically challenging events that families go through together. What we do find in our research is that families that talk about more challenging events, like perhaps growing up in poverty or growing up in many of the families, of course, a lot of our data is collected in the South. We have stories about the civil rights movement. And a lot of those stories don't necessarily have happy endings, but they have endings of strength and perseverance. And sometimes that's the important message, that we persevered as a family, even if something positive didn't come out of it. Not every cloud has a silver lining. That's an important message for adolescents and young adults who are struggling with their own sense of place in the world. Sometimes we can't just make things go away. We can't just solve things. But if we stick together as a family, if we support each other through it, we'll be okay.
Really interesting reflections there. And I think, on a quasi-similar note, there was a question about how does divorce or other family conflict impact the role of family storytelling? And then in conjunction with that, have you all studied and are there noticeable differences in family storytelling in single parent homes?
Yes, the answer is not specifically. We study all kinds of families. So obviously, the families we study are as diverse as families are. And yes, it certainly makes a difference. Whether it's a single parent family, a blended family, step parents, step sisters, the stories change, but the process doesn't. That is the process of open communication, of family storytelling, of sharing difficult times, of talking about one's own feelings and vulnerabilities, and helping the adolescent understand ways to work through those vulnerabilities. In fact, one of the most powerful effects we find is when adolescents know stories that their parents told them about times that they did something actually wrong, that they engaged in, that they hurt somebody, like they lied, they cheated, they stole. Those kinds of stories reassure adolescents that no one is perfect, right? We do things that we're not always proud of, but that doesn't make us bad people, that we can learn from that, we can take from it. And I can impart my lessons to you without you maybe having to go through it. Having said that, I also think it's important to think about your child, where your child is developmentally. There are certain things you're not going to tell a 4-year-old that you might tell a 17-year-old, that you might not tell a 17-year-old, that you would tell a 26-year-old, and so on. So, every relationship is unique. Every parent-child relationship is unique. I think that my advice to parents is go with your gut. We know that parents who share their vulnerabilities with their teenage children help build resilience in their teenagers.
Great, thank you so much. There's been some interest too, kind of building on this idea of families broadly defined, expanding beyond just the nuclear family. And there's a question on, our family stories from cousins, aunts, uncles, et cetera. Is that something you've studied and they're also similarly as important in building the adolescent sense of self?
Yes, they come up. I mean, family stories are often about lots of members of the family. Stories about parents and grandparents seem to be more important in adolescence and young adulthood. And the reason for that is most likely these are strong identity figures for adolescents and young adults. We strongly identify with our parents. If your identity figure is an aunt rather than a mother, then it's going to be her stories that are going to be most important to you. So it's really about who do you identify with? Who do you feel you're most connected to? And it just so happens that in a lot of the families we study, it is the parent, but it certainly can be a grandparent, particularly if it's a grandparent or an aunt or a cousin who raised you. Those stories are still important, but they're not, the adolescent doesn't take on the identification with that person in the same way as we saw in the stories I showed you, that really personal sense of who that person was.
And just continuing on that, I suspect that there are a lot of folks in our audience that, through their genealogical and family history research or through multi-generational family storytelling, know and want to tell stories of ancestors in which, the children themselves, of course, maybe even the elder family member never necessarily met in person. Is that something that y'all have studied? And again, connecting to this idea of genealogy and family history, the stories of our forebears and their potential impact as well.
I have to honestly say, I have not done a lot of research on lineage histories, and how the stories of great-great-grandparents and before them affect the developing adolescent and young adult. I also think that those kinds of lineages become more important as we get a little older. I think for adolescents and young adults, again, that connection, to the lived experience, to sitting with the person who actually had this experience and hearing it from their lips. Also, experiences that happened to them when they were about the age of the listener. So adolescents like stories about when their parents were teenagers. They don't like stories about when their parents were very little kids or even, adults. They like stories that they connect to. Those are the stories they resonate to. Those are the stories they're more likely to retell. I think that changes, I think when you yourself become a parent, you become more interested in your parents' stories about when they became parents. So as we move through life, our own challenges kind of guide the kinds of stories we're interested in. I also think that if you're somebody who wants to leave your stories, I do think that, one, I think children and grandchildren are listening more than you realize. But two, I think it is, not necessarily to sit down and say, sit down with me, I'm going to tell you my story, but get them to tell you about their story and then add how your story relates to it. That can sometimes work. And or again, engaging in an activity together and letting the stories emerge as part of that. The other thing, it turns out that car rides, although now everybody goes into their own little iPod universe, but it used to be, you can get people not to be in their iPod universe. Car rides are amazing places because there's nothing else to do. You might as well listen to stories.
Sure, no, absolutely. We have a question just kind of calling to mind where we are as a society at the present, and knowing that you've been doing this work for decades, just wondering how kind of contemporary norms in family society and just generally busyness, if you've seen that have an impact on family storytelling over time, if that's something you've been able to kind of hone in on and have any observations about.
Interestingly, I think one of the things that's changing is the gender roles in the families. It is the case that in families where there's both a female mother and a male father, the mother tends to be more engaged more in creating the family stories, but that's less so now than it used to be. And I think it's also the case that fathers are more engaged than they used to be. But I also think things are really similar around the processes of family storytelling. Fathers have always been part of the process. They've always been engaged. At least the fathers in the families that we've been working with. So I'm not sure we've seen a lot of changes.
And just continuing to pull on this thread, I know you've written some really interesting reflections about family storytelling during the era of the pandemic. And I was just wondering if there are kind of any salient points or reflections that you'd like to share as we find ourselves amid this historic moment and having opportunities to spend more time as a family, which connects to a lot of Njaimeh's most recent work too.
Yes, thank you for asking that. We're actually doing a fairly large study of how people are talking about the pandemic, particularly young adults and the stresses and strains that they're facing in what is really unprecedented times in terms of the kinds of futures that they're facing, not just because of the pandemic, but because of all of the things that are going on in the world right now, which I don't have to enumerate. I think there's a way in which family stories are more important than ever. We are facing, in many ways, unparalleled challenges. And in other ways, we have to learn how to cope with challenges in ways that previous generations have had to around different kinds of issues, whether it be war or civil unrest. And I think that adolescents, what we're hearing is that they're looking to their parents for guidance on how to figure out their lives from this very precarious position. So I think family stories are more important than ever.
I think that's a powerful note as any for us to draw our evening to a close. I'm so deeply thankful for the insights and expertise and incredible work of both Njaimeh Njie and Dr. Robyn Fivush. I can't thank them enough for their time. I also want to thank my main collaborator for this program, Eric Liiju, the director of the Rao Jewish Archives here at the Heinz History Center. There are a number of colleagues here at the History Center who helped bring this program to fruition, and I want to thank them sincerely as well. I also want to give a shout out to our captioner with ACS Captions, Nicholas. Thank you for contributing to our program this evening. Please do take a moment when you receive an email following this event to complete a post-event survey. We're really excited to continue this series and are always eager to hear feedback on what you thought went well and how we can continue to grow our programming generally at the Heinz History Center. So you will receive, again, a link to that survey via email. Those of us that are joining us virtually, there will also be a link to that survey in the chat if you prefer to fill it out now while everything is fresh on your mind. Again, thank you all so much for joining us. Please do stay tuned for future installments of the Story of Our Lives series. And thanks once again to Njaimeh Njie and Dr. Robyn Fivush for their incredible reflections and their work and shoring up in all of us a sense of the essential nature of sharing family stories. So have a good evening, everyone.
Thank you, Sierra. Thank you all.